Good morning, lovely people. Disorder in the court is in session. Come on in. Come on in and join another day of watching the Rust movie shooting trial. Um, and for those of you who are coming in, I don't know if you know this, but there is a widespread meta out uh, outage. Facebook, Instagram, the metaverse, Threads, all kinds of every service, as far as I know, that Facebook has on the internet, or Meta, the company has on the internet, is down and working its way back up. And the only way people can get any answers to any questions is, guess where? X. So it's pretty funny when one media company goes down, one social media company goes down, you have to rely on their feeds from a different social media company um, to get your news. It's also funny how on YouTube you have to, use Twitter uh, in order to get YouTube's attention, the team YouTube's attention. So now there are a couple interesting things about the fact that Instagram and all this stuff is down. Now I'm always one to be cautious about putting out conspiracy theories and fear mongering and things like that. But there have been these outages there was a big AT&T and I think Verizon outage, maybe at least the AT&T last week, I think it was. Um, the war front, and I hate to say the word war, but it's online. It's it's on the cyber universe. Good morning, Marie. Good morning, Stacy. You know, definitely when different um, countries are at odds with each other, or when people are inside a country are at odds with the country, they start attacking their servers. They start attacking the servers that control the most information. And it's been a while since this has happened to Facebook. It used to happen a lot more often, maybe 10 years ago, I would say. Um, like maybe 10 years. When Twitter first started, it would go down all the time. It would go down all the time. And there was this thing called the fail whale. And you would refresh your browser and you would get this picture of this. Oh, you're in on your Facebook app? Okay. I think it is slowly starting to return. Um, but a long time ago, I would say in the, like 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, around that time, when Twitter went down, uh, you would get a fail whale, and they had to hire this big massive. They had to do this big massive hiring of uh, certain types of engineers and computer scientists to ensure that Twitter didn't go down. It's a much bigger and a much different world these days, and there are a lot more servers to keep up and take care of and protect. Um, no, I don't think it really has to do much, Stacy, with how much you access it. It's just, it depends on where you are. Usually when they're fixing an issue like this, a big massive issue like this, um the fix goes out in waves. Hey, Johnny. The fix goes out in waves, and people don't start to see it until their particular wave has been addressed wherever they sit in that wave. Sometimes it's regional, sometimes it's based on the type of user, um, but they are lumped into users. Not there isn't like a they don't select people to favor. I'm not trying to say that in terms of getting fixed, but um, these things do, even when they when they launch new updates. That's another way that it's basically the same type of thing that they have to do, is they have to roll out the update to a billions and billions of people. They have to do it in batches. So that's why some people get Facebook looking one way and other people still have the old way of looking at Facebook. And then the new way comes out for uh, the new crop of the next crop of users that they roll out to. And fixes happen in the same way. Sometimes they just get to the things that they can fix as fast as possible. Um, when they know that there's low hanging fruit and they're like, okay, well, I can get this area fixed. You just finished cooking pork with mushrooms and mustard and cream. That is fancy, but I don't think I've ever heard the mustard and cream sauce with pork and mushrooms. Hello, Tiggy girl. Welcome. Come on in. Um, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of finding out why Meta went down. If they were smart, they would try to do an update and get in front of it, and they would, tell the world, maybe calm the world down. Or if it, aligns with their agenda, they can say, we've been attacked, but we'll see. We shall see. The unfortunate thing about these companies is they don't have a tendency to be super duper duper um, transparent about when these things. Meta is down, Johnny. It's down. Um, have you? I don't know if you have Facebook or if you have Instagram. I'm pretty sure you have WhatsApp. My understanding is that WhatsApp hasn't been as affected. But it's down, at least here. And my understanding is that it's been affected all over the world, but I don't know where you are. So I feel like have you noticed that the camera switched to the clock feed, the clock view? Are they trying to nudge the cord a little bit? Hey, 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 it's 10 o'clock. It's after 10 o'clock. It's blocked in your country. Lucky you. So, and yeah, I think there could be a Super Tuesday connection. So for those of you who watch this and are not in the US, most people are in the US that watch these courts, I think. But anyway, I know not everybody is. It's Super Tuesday today, where there are primaries in 3 different places. Yeah, Meta is down, Tiggy girl. So, and I hardly ever access those sites. So I wouldn't have known it if I didn't see these reports coming up. So jumping over to the topic of this stream, it'll be interesting to see what the defense does. I'm super curious. As we noted yesterday, the state closed. I'm sorry, the state rests. The state rested. That's correct, Johnny. There's three different states have primaries on Super Tuesday. And like Stacy, she's in one of those states and she just voted. So they are primaries. And it's, you know, primary season is interesting when you have an incumbent president, and then there's, who's running again. Joe Biden is running again, and then you have another candidate who is, usually in the polls beating the snot out of everybody else in the Republican side of things. And um, but I haven't looked at any of the. I don't follow politics super closely. I'm going to say I follow it, but I don't follow it so closely. And I also don't really talk about politics on my channel because it's a buzzkill. Politics is a buzzkill. So there are other channels for that. So, but it is a day when many, 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 many people are voting. And when you have an attack like this, a lot of people get their information, their voting information, um, from Facebook and other Meta products. So that it wouldn't be out of the scope of things that would happen for someone or something to want all of our communication systems to go down. Yes, conspiracy. It's conspiracy time. Whenever this type of stuff happens, when it happens so widespread, it happens on a voting day. You know, you never know. It could be somebody who just wants a, a group that just wants to be a nuisance, or it could be a group that has an agenda. A major. It could be a country that has a major political agenda. Well, I certainly do hope my country has nothing to do with it for a change. We'll see. We shall see. I mean, the 2016 election, that was, they really, your country made their mark in our 2016 election. But, I was reminded at that time, and I'm reminded now, it's not like the US has never messed with other elections in history. We definitely, for sure, have. Yeah, I do too, Tiger Girl. I vote by mail as well. Um, and it really does show you that you really should have a backup. You really should have like a backup system for something as important as voting, which is why we have mail-in votes and paper votes and things like that. That's why we don't vote online, because these kind of attacks could happen. Imagine if we were able to vote online and then that got yay, Solo Sock is here and she voted by mail, and Sparkles is from the mail vote by mail squad. Yay. Um so you know if we were a country that if we went to a completely online voting scenario, I would imagine these things would happen much, much, much more often. And of course, the court is late. Court be late again. This this particular judge, she seems like a cool judge. She's been kind of just non-dramatic, sitting up there. Kind of hard to tell whether she's favoring one side or the other. Um, she doesn't, which is good when you really can't tell. Sometimes you can tell. At least from what I've seen. Maybe there's other opinions about that, but um, but one thing we do know is that it's with the Adam Montgomery trial, that judge, I feel like the thing that was almost the most important to her was time. Um, yeah. What? Oh, there was a jury member they were looking at. Yeah, that's true. That's true. There was some jury member that was having that they were like doing silent messages with, so the jury member didn't have to talk while the court was still on the record. Yeah, we do start with the defense today. And I don't this is such a this is a big case in terms of precedent setting. So it's important, but the stakes are not quite as high as like for somebody who's facing a, murder one charge, right? She Hannah has a involuntary manslaughter charge and tampering with evidence, and she's looking at something like 18 months. Hey, Harlot, she's looking at maybe 18 months in jail or in prison, which, of course, nobody wants that. Nobody wants that on their record. Her career is essentially ruined, right? Um, your building used to be the voting place. Interesting. Huh. So hold on one moment. I'm going to look at other feeds and see if anything else going on. Doesn't look like it. Because I prefer not to use the law and crime feed for this. Oh, yep, that good old government housing. Yeah, I mean, I agree, Johnny. She's young. She will survive. She'll be okay. She'll get some other career when she comes out. Hopefully, one that doesn't involve firearms and firearm safety. Um, you know, but she is young. She has, she'll be, she'll be something like, I don't know, 27, 28 by the time she gets out of jail. She's fine. Yeah, Johnny, they what they do here is they set up polling places everywhere, and people volunteer their churches and you vote at a school, you can vote at a like an Elks Lodge, like a private club. There are people, I think there were times where you could go to people's homes. It's really basically who's where the party puts their polling places and who runs the polling place. And you have to be sanctioned to do that. But, you know, um, they do want to get as many polling places as possible in the area. So yes, church is one of the places where you can vote if that's a designated polling place. But the church doesn't get involved in doing any of the, political recruiting or anything like that. They don't get involved in the politics usually. I mean, some of them do, but not all of them. Um, so I'm just checking to see if there's anything being said on the artist formerly known as X, but it might be a little too clogged up about this Facebook or Meta breakdown. Um, So I'm just trying to see if there's any reporter saying, wait, what? Oh, okay. So this is helpful. This is helpful information. Um, so one of the reasons that they're late today is because they had some motions to take up. They took up a motion in limine from the defense, and um, that is usually what happens at this point in the in a trial, in a criminal trial, is when the state rests, the defense tries to motion for dismissal. And I don't know if you remember, this happened with Adam Montgomery just last week before. Oh, good. I'm glad WhatsApp works. They must be on a completely different system or something. Um, so right, basketball court. So um, it looks like what they did was they heard that motion this morning, and the motion was denied. And it says here, let me try to make it bigger. Yeah. Judge denies defense objection and language stands in jury instructions. Okay. So they also had, I don't know. Well, maybe they didn't do this motion in limine a for dismissal, but they had an objection over language in the jury instructions. And it says judge denies defense objection and language stands in jury instructions. State does not have to demonstrate that Hannah Gutierrez brought the live rounds on set. She loaded the gun. Yeah, I wish they would be showing these motions to us, because yeah. See if there's anything else interesting on X. Apparently, Elon Musk tweeted about this outage, but I didn't see what was tweeted. Let me see what he tweeted. In case you were wondering how superconductors work, this is a good explanation. They are a very interesting phenomenon. Okay, that's not what that is. Oh, so this was Elon Musk's tweet about all these other ones being down. He says, if you're reading this post, it's because our servers are working. He's such a man child. I never met Elon Musk. No, I did not. And to be honest, I'm okay with that. I've really never heard of anyone meeting Elon Musk who's, considered a peon and had a great experience. So that's all. I have not had the pleasure. A lot of my friends have had the pleasure of. I don't use it anymore either. I think it's a terrible platform. It's full of junk. It's like you can't get past the junk anymore. It's just a bunch of people. It's a troll site now. It's what it is. It's like, I think I'll go to X to troll today. That's how I see it. And hey, look, I used to work there. Not, of course, not when Elon Musk took over, but when it was a much different company run by a lot of different, very much different people. Yeah. Let's see if there's anything else interesting about Russ trial. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, look at this. Exactly, Johnny. I think that's the way it's getting to be used here. What the heck, man? Look at this. What is she doing there? I mean, does that just not is a picture not worth 1,000 words? Now, oh, this is photoshopped. It's photoshopped. I get it. Yeah. At first, I thought it is Hannah, but it's definitely a photoshopped picture. Definitely for sure. Somebody put that on there for her. It it was. I could tell after once I looked at it for a little bit that it was somebody else photoshopped that together. It really didn't look like it was something she did. Let's see. Should we vote? Do you think Hannah Gutierrez is guilty of involuntary manslaughter and tampering charges? I'm going to say yes. And survey says 84.6% say yes. That's pretty strong. That's not going very well in her direction. And they have not come back into session yet. Well, I was thinking about showing you guys some videos during breaks, but now that they haven't come here. I know it is awful to make a picture like that, even if it wasn't her. It is awful. So I was watching. What was I watching? Trying to see what I was watching yesterday that I wanted to show you guys. One moment, please, because there was something interesting. Oh, wrong. I need to. Oh, yes. Now, this is a completely different case. Um, so while we're sitting here waiting, what do they mean by the tampering charge? They don't think she did it intentionally, or it wouldn't be. No, so those are two separate charges, Harlot. What? Wait, let me make sure I'm reading your message correctly. What? So they mean by the tampering? Probably. What do they mean by the tampering charge? They don't think she did it intentionally, or it wouldn't be manslaughter, right? So it's. Let's look up the charges. I just want to make sure I'm not talking out of my, you know what. Um, I'm going to share this tab. This is the docket. This is her docket right here. Oh, no, it was after the fact tampering. Harlot, it's after the fact tampering. So, meaning that she, the manslaughter incident was not intentional, but then she tried to hide evidence. So that, yeah, I'm at the docket now. Let's look and see what the actual charges are. Criminal information. Is it? Count 1, involuntary manslaughter. Huh. So I'm trying to get the information straight from the docket. Let's see. Probable cause statement, entry of appearance, request for hearing, state's witness list. Well, I'm looking at the probable cause statement now. Oh, looks like they're coming back. They're coming in. I'll keep looking this up. Oh, she looks sharp
All right.
today.
You may be seated. The state has rested defense.
Your Honor, the defense calls Lorenzo Montoya.
Where is he?
It's right here, Your Honor.
Larissa Montoya.
Please, the judge, raise your right hand.
It's not on. Do you swear affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you'll give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you. Talk into the microphone.
Good morning, Mr. Montoya. Can you please explain to the jury how you are employed?
Morning. My name is Lorenzo Montoya, and I am a compliance officer with New Mexico OSHA.
And what do you do as a compliance officer?
I'm a safety inspector. Accident investigator, in summary.
And what do you need to do to become a safety inspector, accident investigator with OSHA?
Well, you'll require some experience in the field of safety, workplace safety, industrial safety, chemical safety. Accident investigation requires some training, and that can be accomplished on the job.
And what does OSHA stand for?
Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
And what is that a state agency?
New Mexico OSHA is a state plan, whereas federal OSHA is at the federal level nationwide.
Is the Bureau part of the New Mexico Environment Department?
Yes.
So tell us about your experience then in workplace safety.
Sure. My experience with occupational safety began in the U.S. Air Force as an aircraft mechanic. I was in charge of our hazardous materials program. And following that, I worked for the New Mexico Department of Health at the Behavioral Health Institute, performing more sort of safety and walkthroughs for our patient health in that scenario.
And how long have you been a safety inspector with OSHA?
Been with OSHA for 5 years.
How did you get involved in the incident we're here for today in this case?
OSHA, one of its duties is to inspect workplace accidents, incidents, or anything that results in a fatality. In this scenario, we were notified of a workplace fatality And so I was assigned the inspection.
And when you're assigned an inspection that's reported to you, what is the purpose of your investigation?
It's a fact-finding investigation. Our goal is to try to identify what may have caused the incident, so we can either recommend or require corrective measures to prevent such a thing from happening again.
And did you do an investigation of the workplace safety incident that occurred on the set of Rust on October 21st of 2021?
Correct, yes.
What does that mean? What does your investigation entail?
So the investigation is to, if possible, find a root cause for whatever may have led up to the incident. Sometimes things are not so simple and they have a lot of complicated factors that contribute them to occurring. In this scenario, the investigation is to try to identify what led to the accident occurring despite whatever measures may have been put in place to mitigate or prevent in the first place.
And how do you do that? What did you do in this investigation?
The same as any. When we conduct investigations, we interview witnesses. We interview members of management. We might engage with industry professionals if necessary. Visit the site, take photos.
Did you do all those things in this case?
Yes.
When was it that you visited the site?
We originally visited, I believe, the following day, October 22nd, was when we were notified.
Did you communicate with the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Department as well?
Only in the beginning, when we were trying to ensure that we would be able to access the site without potentially stepping into a crime scene.
Which witnesses do you remember interviewing in this case?
That day, the only individual present on site was Catherine Rowe Walters.
Okay. And in the course of your investigation, how many witnesses did you interview in this case?
I could only estimate, off the top of my head. I believe we interviewed 17 people.
Okay. Did you interview Ms. Gutierrez?
We did, yes.
Did you interview Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Did you interview Mr. Baldwin?
Yes.
Did you interview Sarah Zachary?
Yes.
Gabrielle Pickle?
Yes. So, no, wait, not Gabrielle Pickle. Sorry.
Did you review any documents in this case that aided in your investigation?
Yes, we reviewed many documents.
Is your investigation, how is it that you gather documents that you review?
Generally, we request any safety policies, programs, or trainings from the employer.
And what specific documents did you review in this case?
In this case, we had requested any safety policies that they may have, and they provided us with, they're referred to as safety bulletins. And they have a longer title, which I can't recall the name of. They're organized by a committee of some kind. But safety bulletin number 1 is the applicable safety bulletin for firearm safety.
Okay, and what other documents did you review?
They gave us a host of other of the safety bulletins, which cover various miscellanea you encounter on a set, from lighting to electricity and so forth.
What about communications between the various witnesses and cast and crew on set? Did you review any of those things?
We did receive some of those documents, but those did not come from our employer. They came from our individuals that we interviewed.
So the individuals you interviewed, the witnesses, provided you with emails and texts?
Some, yes.
And were you able to come to any findings and conclusions in this case?
We did come to a conclusion.
And were those findings, did you put those findings in a written report?
We did.
Once you do that written report, what's the process there?
We draft the report, proofread it, and when it's completed, we assemble the case file together, and if necessary, we issue citations. And in this scenario, we did issue a citation.
Who did you issue the citation to in this case?
Rust Movie Productions, LLC.
Once you issue, what was the citation that you issued for? Why did you issue a citation?
The citation was issued because in our conclusions, we determined that the management team was responsible for a series of failures that, in our opinion, accumulated in an accident.
Okay, and by management team, who do you mean specifically?
Specifically, we mean the chain of command above Hannah Gutierrez, beginning at the lowest level with Sarah Zachary, and then Gabrielle Pickle, and then Dave Halls.
So did your findings then include any, so then your findings that you just spoke of, those didn't include Ms. Gutierrez, right?
As an employee directly engaged in the work, she is mentioned in the report frequently. But in terms of who do we identify as a member of management, and thus who do we consider responsible, she's not. She's just an employee.
Okay. And once you do your report and issue the citation, does the employer, the production company, get an opportunity to contest that?
They do.
And did they contest that in this case?
They did.
Was a fine ever ultimately levied against the employer in this case?
There was, yes.
What was that fine?
They came to a settlement agreement with the department at $100,000 even.
And in your experience, have you seen the state of New Mexico levy such a high fine like that to an employer for workplace safety ever?
I believe we have in the past.
Is that an average? Is that a usual fine amount that you see?
For typical inspections, no.
Is it higher or lower?
This would be higher than normal.
And your report that you write, once you're completed it, are there any other individuals who review and audit your work?
There are.
Who explain to the jury the levels of review and audit of your findings and conclusions in your report?
Right. So the proofreading, final edits, and that sort of thing fall to first initially my supervisor, and then her supervisor, who is our program manager. And then from him, it would pass up to our bureau chief, Bob Genoway, and as well as our legal team. And potentially our department director, all the way up to the secretary, if it's potentially something that is a matter of public interest.
And in fact, in this case, did the secretary for the environment department review and audit your report and your findings?
He reviewed the report. By the time I got to him, there was nothing left than just to review it.
Okay. And does your report and your citations, are those a matter of public record?
They are.
And is your report kept in the New Mexico OSHA Environment Department?
Yes.
Did you bring a copy? I saw you walk up to the stand today with a folder. Did you bring a copy of your report today?
I have a copy of our investigative summary. Sometimes we refer to that as a narrative.
Okay, and is that the document that you prepared that we've been discussing this morning? That's 11 pages?
It is 11 pages, yes, so possibly.
Okay, and it's this document that you make your findings and conclusions, right?
Yes, we list them out.
Your Honor, I'm going to hand the witness what I've marked as Defendant's Exhibit GG. May I approach?
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes.
So I had to look that up to see if they even cite employees. They don't. They only cite the employers. So none of it's the management team that is cited by OSHA. And yes, that was a settlement that they came to. I shouldn't have said fine, but OSHA does fine companies. And when they do these punitive reports, they only cite the employers, not the employees. So they deem that the employer, the workplace, is responsible for it because it's a workplace safety agency, which is interesting. So if they're bringing this witness up first as their defense, for their defense, is this their strongest defense, that Hannah was not one of the people cited? I don't know. They're basically trying to say, because Hannah was not cited in this report, she doesn't bear any of the blame. But that isn't what this particular agency does. So I don't know if the jury's going to know that when they're deliberating and they're talking about, well, OSHA didn't give her a citation or fine her. Well, it's because she's not part of the management. And what they're saying is that the management team engaged in a series of failures that led to that incident. So I'm not quite sure this really absolves her of any responsibility just because OSHA didn't cite her. I wonder what they're sidebarring about today. Sidebar. This is one of those sidebars.
Your Honor, I would like to sidebar here. Is this, Your Honor, sidebar?
There's no jury here.
Okay, well, that's
so
me.
You do a sidebar to keep a jury from hearing things, but there's no jury here. So
okay, then
if you have an objection, make an objection.
Do you have an objection? Just make that damn objection. And make it a clean objection, please. Make it a good one. Oh my goodness. So this is one of those points in the day where my dog starts to jump around where all my plugs are and everything. Come over here, Steve. Come over here. Good boy. Yeah, you're such a good boy. You're such a good boy. Perfect. You know what? He's such a good boy. He is. My dog is.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that clarification. Perfect. Thank you so much for that clarification. Okay, perfect. Yes. Okay, perfect.
Perfect. He's such a good doggy. But I want to say all the important courty things. My doggy. So I can only operate this stream with one hand right now because he's demanding that he be pet. Oh, the courtroom is so funny sometimes. Oh, that silly, silly courtroom.
An objection?
Shut up.
I have the right to object, I believe, Your Honor.
You have the right to get held in contempt of court. And that's what's going to happen if you don't shut up.
Shut up. Oh, your kitten has the zoomies. Is the zoomies when they race around the house? I know a lot of cats will do that after they've gone to the bathroom. Dogs will do that too. They get so excited when they go potty, and then they do the zoom, zoom, zoom. Steve, not by the plugs, dear. Over here. He always jumps onto this one plug that and then StreamYard says, "It looks like your mic has been unplugged." Can you hear him grunting as I scratch?
So, and if you need a refresher memory from looking at your report, I wanted to go through. So did your report include factual findings from your investigation?
Yes, it does.
Did it also include conclusions that you reached from that investigation?
Yes.
And did you conclude whether, with respect to Hannah Gutierrez, whether she was or was, I guess, did you conclude that Hannah was not provided with enough time to inventory and inspect the dummy blink rounds?
Objection.
Approach.
Oh boy. So now they're going to try to get to specific areas of the report where he made conclusions that could, put Hannah in a good light. And this is one of those times in court I always feel bad for the witness, because they have to sit up there while this long sidebar is going on. And what do they do while they're up there? They can't really look at their phone. They can't really look like they're staring at anybody in the courtroom. They probably shouldn't look at the defendant. The poor guy looks so awkward sitting there.
So like I stated, Mr. Montoya, in your report, did you conclude whether Hannah was provided with enough time to inventory and inspect dummy rounds and blinks?
That was one of our conclusions, yes.
What specifically did you conclude about that?
May I look at the folder?
Would it refresh your recollection to review your report?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Do you have it in front of you, or do you want me to hand you a copy?
I do have a copy in front of me, unless yours is highlighted or marked.
Page 7.
I like the colors on Mr. Bowles today.
Okay.
Okay. So what were your conclusions with respect to whether Ms. Gutierrez was provided enough time to inventory and inspect the dummy rounds from her employer?
We came to the conclusion that she was not afforded time to conduct her duties to the best of her diligence.
And who didn't give her enough time to do that?
She had been instructed by Gabrielle Pickle to focus on other tasks.
And did you determine whether Rust had any process to ensure that live rounds were not brought onto set?
We determined that Rust did not have any specific processes or procedures to prevent that possibility.
And why was it that was on the employer, in your opinion, versus the armor?
In that manner, the employer is asking an individual to perform multiple safety-related functions for them, while also telling them that they're spending too much time engaging in those safety-related functions and need to devote more time to other duties. And on that matter, we determined that to be maybe a managerial decision.
Okay. And did you conclude whether Rust Management provided the armor, Ms. Gutierrez, with any authority on training?
We concluded that she effectively had no authority to make any sort of training decisions.
And in your investigation, was that failure to give the armor authority to determine training, was that a violation of any Rust safety procedures?
It was.
What was that a violation of?
Safety bulletin number 1. One of the required items is that the armor determines when training is necessary and if retraining is necessary based on somebody maybe mishandling a firearm.
Okay, and what evidence, did you see any evidence in your investigation about the armor, Ms. Gutierrez, attempting to attain additional training on firearms for the actors?
Not specifically attempting to retrain, to acquire more time for training, into my memory.
Okay, and was that did the employer, I guess, did Ms. Gutierrez raise any concerns about not being provided adequate time to perform her armor duties?
Yes.
And what in your investigation was Rust's response to that?
Our conclusion was that those statements regarding not having enough time went unheeded and uncommented on.
By whom?
Gabrielle Pickle and possibly Sarah Zachary or Dave Halls.
Sarah Zachary and Dave Halls?
Yes.
Did you make any conclusions in your findings in your report about who the Rust safety official was on set?
We did.
Who was that?
Dave Halls.
And did you find any fault with anything that Dave Halls did?
So OSHA considers the entire management apparatus to be a single entity. And in this scenario, there are these 3 individuals who are part of this upper level of management. And Dave Hall's responsibility as the safety coordinator on set. We certainly found that there were a number of safety bulletin number 1 policies that were not followed or adhered to that would fall within his purview.
Okay, and were any of those pertaining to having the actors point guns at crew members?
That is one of the items in the safety bulletin.
And are you saying that Mr. Halls and Rust top level management were in violation of that?
Rust's management team did not take measures that were required in safety bulletin number 1 to permit the aiming of a firearm at a camera or whatever the case might be.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about Rust not providing Ms. Gutierrez with sufficient time to thoroughly inventory ammunition. And by ammunition, I mean blanks and dummies. Were there any findings with respect to Rust providing their staff sufficient time to inspect this ammunition to ensure there were no live rounds present?
No, our conclusion was they weren't afforded time. I'm sorry.
And with respect to whether or not Rust production showed an indifference to hazards associated with firearms, what was your opinion on that?
The conclusion of the Bureau on that was based on the sheer number of requirements listed in safety bulletin number 1 that were either ignored or otherwise not at all followed or totally contrary in practice to. We found that Rust was willful. They were plain indifferent to the recognized hazards of firearms.
Okay. And when you're doing this, does OSHA have a requirement to look at fault of specific employees?
As part of our inspection process, we try to identify a root cause if we can. Whether an accident is caused because someone is falling asleep at the wheel or whatever the case might be, we do try to identify those things. In this scenario, we weren't necessarily able to identify any particular standout reason why an employee would be to blame.
So what was, in total bottom line here, the root cause that you found?
To summarize the entire report would be that Rush Movie Productions identified a hazard, a workplace hazard, working with firearms, and they adopted firearm safety policies, but they totally failed to enforce them, train their employees on them, practice them, reference them, nothing. They adopted it and it stopped at the word adoption. Nothing further happened.
Okay. And was it brought to their attention by Ms. Gutierrez and others that there were these deficiencies?
Safety concerns were raised regarding the policies listed in Safety Bulletin number 1 not being followed.
And what was Rust's response to those concerns that were raised by Ms. Gutierrez?
Again, they seem to have chosen to simply not respond.
I wonder if she asked for if she raised those concerns after the first accidental discharge. Because if she raised those concerns after the first accidental discharge, there were still live rounds on the set. Right? There were still live rounds on the set. And yeah, they didn't follow through with any of their...
I'll pass the witness.
Cross-examine.
Okay, we get a
Thank you, Your
chance
Honor.
to see this gentleman again.
Mr. Montoya, good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit before I get into any of the details, a little bit more about the inspection process that you typically conduct. How long do you have to perform this inspection?
OSHA has a limit of 6 months to the day to initiate and conclude an inspection.
All right. So does that mean that in some instances you may not have all of the evidence that is available from, for example, an investigating law enforcement agency?
Correct.
And in this case, is it true that you did not have the sheriff's report at the time that you issued your report?
Yes, the sheriff's report was the following day or two, I believe.
All right. So just to be clear, none of the information that was included in the sheriff's investigative report made its way into your report and findings, correct?
Correct. Only their initial public release, press release.
The press release.
Only that.
Okay, but not any of the actual investigative materials?
No.
All right. Is OHSB authorized under law to fine or penalize individual employees?
No.
Only employers, correct?
Correct.
And as a result of that, I believe you explained that your primary role of investigation is to look at what the employer did in terms of creating a potentially hazardous situation.
What they could do to prevent it or what they did to create it, yes.
Great, thank you. So even if as part of your investigation, you found concerning conduct by an individual employee, you couldn't issue that person a fine, correct?
Not individually, no.
Great. And this is not a criminal investigation that you're conducting, correct?
Correct.
All right. And so you mentioned you did not review the Santa Fe Sheriff's Office report. Did you conduct a forensic download of any of the individuals' phones involved in this incident?
No.
Did you review the over 100% behind the scenes videos that were produced by production outfitters?
No, those were not available to us.
All right. Did you review any footage from the filming of the Rust movie?
Only a small clip that was put into public media.
Was that the clip just kind of a few second clip of Mr. Baldwin manipulating the firearm out of his bandolier?
Correct.
So all of the other videos that were filmed as part of the movie, you did not look at any of those, correct?
Correct.
All right. Did you hire any sort of firearms expert to review the revolver or ammunition?
We did not.
All right. Did you hire or consult with an expert in armor, like film armoring?
No, we did not.
All right. Did you review any of the fingerprint analysis from the FBI?
No.
Did you review any of the DNA analysis from the FBI?
No.
Did you review any of the ballistic chemistry analysis from the FBI?
No.
Are you aware that Ms. Gutierrez worked in her role as an armorer for 10 of the 12 filming days?
As far as we're aware, it was only permitted 8
Okay.
days as an armor.
So you would be surprised to hear that she actually was afforded 10 armorer days out of the 12 filming days?
It would be news.
Yes, okay, great. Are you aware that Ms. Tickle testified at trial that if Ms. Gutierrez had asked for more than those 10 days, she may have granted them if they were justified?
I'm not aware that she testified that.
All right. Are you aware that on the morning of October 21st, 2021, Ms. Gutierrez had approximately 3 hours of time in which she could have inspected ammunition or done a safety check of the revolver involved in this incident?
No.
Are you aware that it's been testified here in the court that Ms. Zachary was Ms. Gutierrez's supervisor when she was performing props, but that the roles were actually reversed? That Ms. Gutierrez provided instruction to Ms. Zachary with regard to the armorer duties?
Yes, with some interplay in that they're not quite peers.
Great. And do you agree that Ms. Gutierrez in her role as armorer contributed to some of the issues that you identified in your report?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. Do you agree that Ms. Gutierrez in her role as armorer contributed to some of the findings that you issued in your report?
No, I'm not sure I could necessarily agree.
Okay. Give me just a minute. If you were to return to page 4 of your report. On paragraph 13,
okay.
The last sentence, unless a round is removed from a storage box or firearm and inspected, it cannot be verified as a dummy round. Do you believe that that is the function of an armorer to perform this inspection that you indicated on this report?
I believe that would be one of their many functions, yes.
Right. So if she failed to do that, then would she have contributed in this regard?
OSHA's opinion is that management has to enable the work to be done in the first place. So if she didn't do that, our question would be, why wasn't someone ensuring that she would do that? And thus we would turn back to management.
Okay, sure. And that gets back to the whole fact that you're looking at the employer primarily as the basis of your investigation, correct?
Correct.
All right. Do you agree that if Ms. Gutierrez loaded live ammunition into a firearm and then passed it off as a cold gun, that would be a workplace hazard?
Certainly.
All right. And then lastly, are you aware, I believe you conducted an interview with Ms. Gutierrez, correct?
Correct.
And in that interview, she indicated to you that she asked 2 producers for additional training time, correct? Do you recall that?
I don't recall it off the top of my head.
Okay. All right. Nothing further.
Redirect.
He's trying to figure out if he answered that
little
question
hypothetical
right.
that Mr. Lewis just said. If Ms. Gutierrez had passed off a loaded gun as cold, would that be a workplace hazard? What if Rust had not allowed the armor sufficient time to inspect that gun? and rushed her and instructed her specifically of what they wanted her to do. Whose fault would it be then?
Come in. Come in.
Yeah, whose fault would it be then? Hey, Janessa. Please, everyone, remember to hit that thumbs up.
I think I need to rephrase my question.
Yeah.
So if, in what Mr. Lewis had stated, if there was a gun passed off as cold, whose fault would it be, or whose responsibility would it be to ensure that the armor had sufficient time and resources to make that gun safe?
It's always the responsibility of management to supervise effectively and quality control effectively. If an employee is conducting a safety-related task, they pass it off as safe, and supervision does nothing with that, and they allow it to be implemented. Supervision's responsibility to double-check that.
And was it also Rust's responsibility to ensure that the employee had to take those? I guess, did your investigation reveal that Ms. Gutierrez had specifically requested more time to do those safety checks?
She had expressed on more than one occasion that she did not have sufficient time.
And Rust's response, was there any fault in Rust's response to Ms. Gutierrez's concerns and requests?
In one scenario, Gabrielle Pickle responded that to the point that there are no more armor days out of the 8 left. She had responded that then no more training days are to occur. So their response has been to just, okay, we'll cut it then.
Cut off the firearm training days.
Right.
And did you actually receive a copy of the Santa Fe Sheriff's report after this report of yours came out?
Our office received a copy of the report, yes.
And had you guys previously requested that many times from them?
We had previously requested whatever documents they'd be willing to share or assist with.
And is it necessary to review fingerprints to determine whether Rust Management demonstrated an indifference to hazards and violation of their own standards? Do you have to look at fingerprints to do that?
No, not at all.
Do you have to look at DNA to do that?
No.
Or any firearms expert?
Not to determine their safety conduct and so forth, no.
Okay. And were there any other communications that you reviewed between Ms. Gutierrez and Gabrielle Pickle that demonstrated or supported your findings that Rust was at fault in this and not Ms. Gutierrez individually?
Objection.
I'll rephrase the question, Your Honor.
We're going to strike that question. Go ahead, make another one.
Are there, you said that you can, is it true that you can actually find fault with specific individuals' conduct?
May I ask you to clarify?
Yeah, can you find fault with, when your investigation, you're looking at specific individuals, and can you say that individual was wrong for doing this?
Objection.
Well,
So I think what she keeps doing is asking questions that
You're right, I think you already answered that question, so I won't ask it again. Were there any other communications that you observed between Gabrielle Pickle and Ms. Gutierrez that was evidence of Rust not providing Ms. Gutierrez with the necessary resources that she needed?
Off the top of my head, there was a text conversation and then a separate email.
stay.
He hasn't talked about what it was. Without stating what the text conversation is, can you please continue your answer?
Yes, and a separate email conversation.
Okay, so you reviewed actual texts and emails between Gabrielle Pickle and Ms. Gutierrez.
We reviewed screenshots of their texts and emails, yes.
Okay. And the relevance of without saying what's in it, the relevance of that informed which findings in your report?
Yes.
Which ones?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, the conversations you reviewed between Gabrielle Pickle and Ms. Gutierrez. What did those pertain to in terms of your findings? Which findings did that?
Apologies. Yes, so I would have to review the text versus the email conversations to remember which one is which. One is regarding the notification regarding that they have used all 8 of their armor days and the no further training then, because that would require more days. And then the other conversation, I believe, was regarding firearms being left unattended or something of that nature.
Okay. And what was your finding? And if you need to refresh your memory by looking at your report, that's fine. But what was your finding with regard to firearms being left unattended?
Objection.
Affirmed.
It seems like what this rebuttal questioning line of questioning is trying to do the same thing that the state just did, is say, OSHA does do this, OSHA doesn't do that, OSHA had access to this, OSHA didn't have access to that. Here are the specific things that contributed to your final conclusions in the report. And then it's like she's weaving in facts not in evidence in terms of, what the role of OSHA is.
So you can answer the question, Mr. Montoya. It was the finding in your report pertaining to firearms being left unattended.
Sure. May I refresh my memory?
Yes, please. Okay, does that refresh your memory?
Yes.
What was that finding?
So our conclusions from that were in that conversation, they expressed that the production team, meaning Gabrielle Pickle and her peers, had received reports that firearms were being left unattended, and Ms. Gutierrez-Reed's response to that.
And I want you to tell me what her response was. I want to talk about your finding based on her response.
The finding was that an employee expressed that this was a very serious safety-related job and that they needed time to conduct that effectively.
Okay. And that was your finding was that what? That Russ?
We consider that heightened awareness. An employee is informing management that there is a safety concern or that they have an issue with something, and it is then on management to then take that concern and do something about it. In this scenario, it resulted in no response.
Okay, thank you.
All right, this witness is excused. Thank you. Next witness.
Your Honor, the defense calls Robert Jimway.
I agree, Janessa. All right, let's see.
Judge, raise your hand.
Let's see
Do
who
you
this
swear affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you'll give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Have a seat talking to the microphone.
Mr. Genoway, can you please just tell the jury how you were employed?
Can we get a spelling? Do you have the name?
Oh, she didn't get the name. Can you please state and spell your name for the jury?
Robert Genoway, that's RobertGenoway.
Mr. Genoway, how are you employed?
I am the Bureau Chief for the Environment Department's Occupational Health and Safety Bureau, also known as New Mexico OSHA.
And what do you do as the bureau chief?
Hey,
I
Teresa.
oversee all of the OSHA operations for the state, including overseeing our compliance and enforcement program.
Are you, in the terms of hierarchy, is there anybody above you?
Not within the OSHA Bureau. I report to a division director who reports to our Deputy Cabinet Secretary.
And do you supervise, we just heard from Mr. Montoya, do you supervise Mr. Montoya?
Not directly, but I am in the chain of command over Mr. Montoya.
And how did you review Mr. Montoya's report in this case?
Yes, I did.
And can you explain the process of how that review happens once the report is finalized? What happens with it?
Well, I work with the inspector throughout the course of an investigation, once an investigation is assigned. And once a draft report is produced by the inspector, then it will go through various levels of management review. And for this type of a case, for a fatality investigation, I would normally review the entire case file, including a narrative report and other portions of the case file to ensure that if we're issuing citations that they meet with certain requirements of legal sufficiency.
So you reviewed the entire case file. What is in that case file?
The case file will contain documentation obtained from an employer. Also may contain documentation from other sources, medical investigator reports, any type of police reports that are available at the time, photographs, audio recordings, interviews of employees and other witnesses, and then the documents that are produced by our bureau, including an inspection report and narrative.
And when you review that and review the report, in this case, did you review Mr. Montoya's report pertaining to the fatality at the Rust production site on October 21st, 2021?
Yes.
And did you concur with that report?
Yes.
Did you make any changes to that report?
I'm sure that any report will go through, minor editorial changes, again, to ensure that we are, the content meets with legal sufficiency prior to issuance of a citation. So yes, I'm sure there were some minor changes that were made during the review process.
And with respect to OSHA's role in this, what exactly is it that your bureau is investigating and looking for?
Our primary purpose is to determine whether any violations of OSHA statute and regulations caused or contributed to the accident that's being investigated.
And ultimately, whose determination was it on whether or not to cite Rust Productions with any violations?
It was mine.
What types of standards do you hold them to?
Well, we would, of course, look for violations of any OSHA standards that apply to the work site that's being inspected. There's a whole range of standards that apply, but we also, in addition to standards, most of which are incorporated at the state level from federal OSHA standards. But the Act itself, our governing statute, also includes general language requiring employers to provide a safe workplace.
Is there any OSHA standards specific to firearm safety on a movie set?
No.
Then do you have to look at industry standards on that?
What we look at is whether or not the hazard associated with firearms is recognized either within the industry or specifically by the employer at the work site to determine whether that employer should have or could have known about a hazardous condition and taken actions to correct that condition.
And what types of, were you provided any, or did you review any industry standards pertaining to the hazard of a firearm on a movie set in this case?
Yes, I mean, in particular, we looked at safety bulletins that are produced by jointly by the industry and collective bargaining bodies that contributed to that, to those bulletins as well.
Do you believe that the investigation that took place in this case was thorough?
Yes.
Why do you believe that?
Well, I've overseen the work of Mr. Montoya for several years leading up to this investigation. I know his work to be thorough. And in reviewing the report, I found that our investigator went to great lengths to collect as much evidence as possible prior to producing the report.
And do you happen to recall how many interviews were done in this case by you or by OSHA?
I don't recall, no.
Did you find any fault in the way the investigation was done by Mr. Montoya?
No.
Yeah, my understanding is that OSHA has about 6 months to complete its investigation, and that in this case, Santa Fe Sheriff's Department hadn't provided your bureau with a copy of their report. Is that right?
That's my recollection, yes.
That report wasn't provided until after the report was issued?
I believe that's correct, yes.
So how does that, I guess, do you believe that reviewing the Santa Fe Sheriff's report is necessary to come to the findings that your office came to?
No.
Why?
Because we're looking at an employer's responsibilities specifically under the OSHA Act, which is separate from criminal law enforcement.
Right. And what are the specific, are you looking for any violations of safety rules that the employer engaged in?
Yes.
So who is it that decided to issue the citation in this case?
I did.
And what was the amount of the fine that was levied against Rust Production?
The initial proposed penalty was 130 some thousand. I don't recall the exact amount, but it was 130 some $1,000.
Okay. And how is that amount chosen?
It's based on the statutory maximum provided in the OSHA Act.
So was Rust levied the statutory maximum fine provided in the OSHA Act for its violations of workplace safety?
Yes.
No further questions.
Cross-exam.
Mr. Genoway, good morning. I suppose let's just cut to the chase here. You're not conducting a criminal investigation at OSHA, are you?
No.
So the things that you're looking for the purposes of your investigation may not be the same things that law enforcement may be looking for as part of their investigation, correct?
I believe that to be the case.
Great. You said, I know you indicated you reviewed several interviews and documentation and Mr. Montoya's report. As part of that, did you form an opinion as to whether Ms. Gutierrez's actions as an armor contributed to the breakdowns that occurred on the Rust set?
No.
Do you recall giving a recorded statement during a pretrial interview in this case?
I don't recall being interviewed prior to trial.
You don't recall giving a Zoom interview in this case on February 5th, 2004?
I'm sorry, did you repeat the date?
2004.
I'm sorry, 2024, February 5th, 2024.
No, I don't recall that.
Okay. You have no recollection of participating in a Zoom interview with the counsel for the state, and Scott Elliott, an investigator for Hannah Gutierrez?
No.
All right, yeah.
Yes, my dog's name is Steve.
Mr. Genoa, would it refresh your memory if I showed you a transcript of that interview?
It might help.
May I approach?
So this is interesting. Apparently the witness doesn't remember meeting with the prosecution on a Zoom call.
The date of the interview, I don't know if this will help you, but the correct date of the interview is November 7th, 2023.
Does that help?
I don't recall ever
He doesn't
doing an
recall.
interview.
Okay, may I approach?
So if nothing else, it impeaches the witness to show that he did do an interview just a few months ago. Yes, I named my dog after Steve Jobs, both as a tribute and as a joke, so that I could say, sit Steve, lay Steve. He's looking at me now. Did you hear your name, Steve? It's a good question, Janessa, of whether he doesn't remember or is conveniently unremembering. I mean, of course, we
Certainly
have to
sounds
know
like-
that the
Sounds like responses I would have provided, but I have to say honestly that I don't know.
well, that impeaches this witness a bit to not remember something that he clearly did, not just a few months ago. Walter White, what
I'm
happened
going
to
to
your
point your
brain?
attention to a particular part of this interview, and then I'm going to ask you some questions. May I approach?
It looked like the defense was surprised about this meeting as well. He's like, gee, I'm really interested in what I said and what I did. Can you please refresh my memory?
Cycle 6 of our transcript.
Yeah, this guy needs better. He needs to cook a better batch for himself. Okay, that was a bad reference.
Are you asking me to read?
I'm just asking you to read this right now, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Okay.
So just read through here.
And where do you want me to start?
To yourself.
Okay.
Oh, yes, sorry, to yourself.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'll start you here. So, I'm gonna read. Just let me know when you're ready for me to scroll down.
Yeah, it was filmed in New Mexico. I think it was also partially filmed in Arizona, but it definitely took place in New Mexico. It was centered in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Mr. Genoa, do you agree with me that during this interview, you agreed that Ms. Gutierrez, her actions contributed to the breakdown that occurred on the set?
Yes.
All right.
Oh, that's not good for the
I'm going
defense.
to ask you a couple questions about
That's not good for the defense.
the investigatory materials that you reviewed. You already indicated you do not have a copy of the Santa Fe Sheriff's Office report, correct?
I'm not sure whether we obtained one after issuing our citations.
And to be clear, I'm talking about as OS or OHSB conducted its investigation and issued its findings, you did not have the benefit of the Santa Fe Sheriff's Office investigatory report to assist you with that, correct?
Correct.
All right. And did you have the benefit of reviewing any behind the scenes videos that were filmed on the set of Rust?
Not that I can recall.
Do you recall if you reviewed any footage from the filming of the Rust movie cameras?
No.
Did you engage the assistance of any expert armorers for your purposes of your investigation?
We didn't engage your contract. We had some brief discussions with potential experts, but we never actually engaged those experts.
You never relied on any of their opinions to inform your investigation?
No.
Okay. I know that you were asked some questions about determining fines against employers. Is it fair to say that OSHA's purview is not to assess fines against individual employees?
That's correct.
So is it also fair to say then that even if you found that there had been some concerning conduct by an employee, you wouldn't have fined that employee, correct?
Correct.
All right. Thank you. Nothing further.
Redirect.
Let's see if this works. I can't imagine the defense thought it was smart to put this guy on the stand.
But would you have said in your report that a specific employee failed to do something if that's what you determined?
In most cases, no.
Now, did Rust afford, in this case, the armor with sufficient time to thoroughly inventory the ammunition?
Objection.
She always gets a poopy look on her face when she gets objected to. She's like, hey, you can't object. So I'm feeling like the defense is like, it was a risky move for them to put this guy on the stand, because they had to know that it opens the door to the prosecution being like, well, you did find this and you didn't find that. I don't know. I don't think this is working out quite how the defense thought it was going to work out. Yeah, I agree, Tiggy girl. And as you know, we're getting to see what the defense has to work with. And so far, it's 2 different OSHA representatives that didn't have access, that weren't investigating this criminally. They were investigating it from a workplace safety perspective, which always accrues onto the management.
To ask you with respect to the Bureau's finding, did the Bureau, the OSHB Bureau, find that Rust failed to afford the armor with time to thoroughly inventory the ammunition?
I don't know if I recall that specifically. What I do recall is that our investigation determined that, from my recollection, more in general, that sufficient time for armor.
Would it refresh your memory to look at the report?
Yes.
Page 7. Said he didn't remember.
I'm going to object to that.
Billy said he didn't remember. I'm going to refresh his memory. He said it would help him.
He's not looking very happy with himself. He sat there and closed his eyes like, oh, geez. I'm going to get wrecked back at the office. Oh, they're laughing. They have a joke that they're laughing about. So, point being that they weren't doing a criminal investigation, and this is a criminal case. These are criminal charges.
Do you remember the exact wording of the specific finding in the report pertaining to affording the armor time on inventory of ammunition?
No.
Would it refresh your memory to look at the report?
Yes.
Okay, page 7. Your Honor, may I approach?
He is wearing a pink blazer. Solo? Just kidding. yeah, he doesn't seem too happy to be there.
Yes.
Did OSHB find that Rust failed to afford the armor time to thoroughly inventory the ammunition?
Yes.
Did Rust find that, did OSHB find that Rust did not provide the armor with the authority to determine if additional training was required in violation of Rust safety procedures?
I recall that the investigation found that sufficient time wasn't provided by Rust.
It was not provided, is that what you said?
Sufficient time was not provided by Rust.
Okay, so, and were there also findings by OSHB that despite efforts by employees that Rust ignored some of the safety concerns?
Objection.
She puts a lot of her feelings on her sleeve. And I'm not judging at all. I do that too. I don't, one of the things I like about Emily D. Baker is she's like, I could never be a judge because my facial expressions I can't control them. And I feel like it's that way for this defense attorney. I mean, she seems very competent and like she knows what she's doing, but a tiny bit inexperienced in the courtroom, a little bit shaky, but she is definitely showing her reaction when she gets objected to. And sometimes that doesn't totally play well with the jury. Yeah, I agree, Teresa. Management was definitely in fault for cutting corners,
What was your understanding of
what OSHA found.
the Rust findings with respect to whether safety concerns were that were brought to Rust's attention were addressed correctly?
Right. Our investigation found that Rust failed to adequately review safety oversights on the set and so that they could take necessary action to prevent recurrence.
So when you're asked on cross about a statement you gave in some pretrial interview about Ms. Gutierrez contributing to a breakdown on the set, why is it that you believe that's possible?
Well, what we would look for in an investigation is whether acts on the part of employees are preventable on the part of an employer. That's part of a determination of what we call the employer knowledge aspect of a violation. So that's why we would look at that type of information.
Okay, and in this case, did you determine whether the breakdowns from Gutierrez were due to any act of the employer?
Yes, we determined that those breakdowns were caused by failures of the employer to adequately oversee safety.
Thank you. No further questions.
So everybody's at fault.
All right, sir, you're excused. Thank you.
Yeah.
Next witness.
Is it going to be OSHA? Oh, we got another approach. We have yet another.
Your Honor, I would like to sidebar here. Is this, Your Honor, sidebar?
There's no jury here.
Okay, well, that's
So
me.
you do a sidebar to keep a jury from hearing things, but there's no jury here. So
Okay, then
if you
you're,
have an objection, make an objection.
Judge, you're so gorgeous, Miss Judge. I just have to tell you, you're gorgeous.
thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Maybe they should try that with this judge. Judge, you are gorgeous. Maybe that's what they're doing right now at the sidebar. You're gorgeous.
But was I respectful to you, sir?
Yes.
I expect you to be respectful to me.
You're going to get our next witness.
Okay.
That's right. She's no Camille Vasquez. Boy, that Camille Vasquez, man, she nailed it. She was like the perfect pick for that role that she took, Camille Vasquez. She does have a huge nameplate. And her name is the same as an OG Watts Island YouTuber who kind of went off for a while and is back apparently. So who are they calling now? If that's their only two witnesses, we got guilty for sure. Oh. This person looks very nervous and upset and distressed. But I could be reading something into it.
Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you've given this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, have a seat, talk into the microphone.
Good morning, sir. Can you please state your name again for the jury?
Scott Elliott.
Mr. Elliott, what do you do for a living currently?
I'm currently a private investigator.
And
oh, of course.
Mr. Elliott, prior to becoming a private investigator, did you have a career in law enforcement?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell the jury what your career was in law enforcement? How many years?
Military and civilian, or just?
Let's start with civilian and we'll work back.
Okay. I was hired by the Albuquerque Police Department and I attended the academy starting in February of 1993. I retired in 2011. During that time period, I started out field services, normal uniform patrol. I went to the gang unit. Then I became a violent crimes detective in about 1995, 96. And in 1998, I became a homicide detective. And I was a homicide detective when I retired in 2011.
So, sir, you spent approximately, it sounds like 13 years in homicide division?
Part of that was interrupted by post 9/11 deployment, but yes.
At post 9/11, did you deploy overseas?
I did.
And was that part of your, and we'll get into your military, part of your military duties?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Wow.
Sir, how many, as part of your homicide portion of your APD employment, approximately how many investigations do you think you worked on in homicide?
As a case agent, 35 or 40, assisting on homicides, 150, 200.
And this is just homicides. You probably had 150, 200 in terms of violent crime or other types of narcotics or any types of, how many investigations do you think you've handled in the course of your police career? Do you even have an estimate?
I don't think so. I became a detective in 1995. Hundreds of cases a year. And then by the time I was in violent crimes, it was slightly reduced, but that was all violent crime short of homicide. So lots of those.
And you also talked about your military service. Can you tell the jury briefly about whether you had law enforcement type experience with the military?
Yes, I was commissioned in 1981 in the infantry. I spent approximately 10 years on active duty, various duties was part of the active duty time. And then I left the service in active duty in 1992 and 1993, started with the police department. Then I transferred into the reserves. In Albuquerque, there was not an infantry unit anywhere nearby. So I was an engineer officer for a little while, and then I became a secondary specialty of military policeman. And I worked in those functions until I transferred from the Army in 2003 to the Air Force. When I transferred to the Air Force, I took command of what's called a heavy weapons squadron, which was a security forces unit, which is Air Force police. The difference with that unit is that they had weapon systems that are normally found in the Army. Mortars, snipers, grenade launchers, things like that. So my prior Army career folded right into that unit and its mission.
So, sir, you've conducted investigations both civilian and military environments. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
Okay, and Your Honor, at this time, I tender Mr. Elliott as an expert in quality of investigations, law enforcement investigations.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the first thing you said, Mr. Johnson.
Oh, sure, the quality of law enforcement investigations.
No objection.
All right, he's an expert as described.
Mr. Elliott, can you tell the jury specifically, what did you do in this particular case? Just an overview scope.
Well, I reviewed all the discovery, all the reports, videos, any documentation, any evidence that included going in physically looking at the evidence in this case. In addition to that, I interviewed the majority of the state's witnesses in what's called pretrial interviews. I think the only ones I didn't interview were the FBI employees.
Do you recall ballpark how many interviews you conducted in this case, just an approximate?
35, 40 maybe.
And in terms of the reports, did you review voluminous reports in this case as well?
Yes, I did.
And have you, as an expert, also made some conclusions based on your review of the materials, your interviews, and what you've seen in this case?
I did.
Okay. I don't want to hit every point that you might make, but I want to hit some of the major ones. First of all, at the scene, at the initial scene when law enforcement responds, can you tell the jury, do you have any conclusions about the quality of the investigation by the sheriffs at the scene?
Yeah, some of that was reached by my own observations and some of it through interviews of the deputies on the scene. I felt like their response was probably not what it should be. There were hundreds of people on that ranch, but if you narrow it down to who was in the church at the time of the shooting and who may have had involvement with the case, for example, the people that are just outside, there was really about 20 people. The first responding deputies, their job is first preservation of life, and then it is preservation of evidence and identifying witnesses and possible suspects. In this case, it was known very quickly who the shooter was, but it wasn't known who the witnesses were. And those witnesses, once they were identified, they should have been segregated so they couldn't talk among themselves.
Now, let me stop you right there. When you initially, as a law enforcement homicide detective or somebody going on scene, you identify the shooter, what in your opinion is one of the first things that you should do?
Well, the first thing you do is put someone with that individual, segregate them from everyone else. You also want to, those individuals, since you are preserving evidence, you also want to secure their cell phones.
Now, in this case, in the materials you reviewed, did it appear to you that Mr. Baldwin was segregated?
Not at all.
And along with the conclusion you just stated, did it appear that his cell phone was taken from him?
No, it was not.
Mr. Elliott, did it appear to you that at any time at the scene that day, Mr. Baldwin was segregated?
He was not.
Okay. Next, you talked about identifying key witnesses and preserving evidence. Can you explain that a little more?
Yes. Well, the scene was secured. You don't often have a scene of that small of an environment. It was known immediately that the shooting occurred inside that church structure and that it probably involved a couple of people just outside near that weapons cart. So that was the immediate concern, that area there. And the deputies, one of the early responding deputies did get a pretty good list of who was in the church and gave that to the lieutenant. But those individuals were not segregated from everybody else. They were able to mingle with people who were not on scene, who were in a different part of the ranch. Conversations were taking place. People were talking on cell phones. And it's really unknown who they were talking to.
And what is the danger or what is the concern on the part of an investigator when suspects or witnesses are talking?
Well, a couple things. One, people could be getting their story straight. The other is it causes witnesses to misremember what they did and what they saw. Because in my experience, good, honest citizens try to help. And they'll tell you something that their neighbor told them as if it was something that they saw. And it is just human nature that if you talk about something over and over and over again, eventually there are parts of it that you think that you did, and it was what someone else did. So you want to clean, even if it's very brief and they didn't see very much or they didn't hear very much, you want a clean statement of what their knowledge is.
Okay, and with regard to whether, if that is not done, what can that lead to? What is your conclusion about what can happen if people are not segregated and they're allowed to talk to people?
Well, one, you can delete things off your phone. You can delete photos. It wasn't known at the time if somebody was videotaping what was going on inside on their phone. That's possible. Almost every case you work now, someone has videotaped it with their phone.
Did you also determine, and this is another point, but that someone had left the scene and whether that person had been identified?
As far as I know, they still have not been identified.
With regard to securing the prop card on that scene, what is your opinion as to whether that was appropriately handled?
No, it should have remained in place. There was an individual, Brian, was told to go get the cart. He went out of sight behind the church, on the other side of the church, and then he moved the cart around towards the lieutenant's marked unit. That should not have been done.
As well, what is your opinion as to or do you have any concerns about how the evidence on top of the prop cart was handled?
Well, Lieutenant Benavides took possession of the firearm with an ungloved hand, and he grabbed it right around the cylinder. So the largest portion of the revolver is how he picked up the revolver, put it into his vehicle, at another occasion pulled it out of his vehicle and put it back on the cart. He did the same thing with the ammo boxes from the cart. So you definitely can't preserve evidence by touching things with your bare hands, but it also could have damaged anything that was on the boxes or the firearm prior to him handling it.
Now, working our way through this, and you may be aware that there was evidence there were rounds thrown away in the course of your investigation. Do you have any concerns at this point with how the police responded to that? The sheriffs responded to that matter?
Well, it's my understanding that they were notified quite late. I think it was a month later. But I didn't see any attempt to go out and see if they were still in the trash at the ranch.
And is that something in your normal investigation, when you were doing homicide investigations, you want to collect all of the potential evidence?
Well, in this case, there's a couple things. The law enforcement was told almost immediately, this was the firearm used. But the projectile can't be matched to a firearm. And I know there were at least 3 .45 long Colt revolvers on that cart that day. So although the casing has been tested to match the firearm that was presented to law enforcement, there's no way to know that projectile positively came from that firearm.
Along with the rounds that were thrown away, did you have any other concerns on the follow-up with regard to identifying the source of that live round or live rounds that appeared on set?
That didn't seem to be followed up on very strongly. It's a little confusing when rounds came onto the set or the scene, the ranch, and who brought them. It seemed that there were a number of times that, at least one occasion, I thought it was more, that Sarah went to PDQ in Albuquerque and brought ammo back.
In fact, they've never figured
There
it
was
out.
The initial ammo provided by PDQ, And then there was some ammo provided by Ms. Gutierrez.
And did you identify any other investigative steps that you think should have been taken to try to further look into the source of the live rounds?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about the white boxes with the JS. That individual has never been interviewed, the producer of the ammunition. So there really was no backtracking of where the ammo came from. You can't say this ammo on the prop cart definitively where it came from. You can't say the ammunition in the prop truck definitively where it came from. There should have been more work done in that area.
And when you're in a situation like this as a former homicide detective, when you're trying to trace the root cause of tragic situation that's occurred, is that something that would be important to you to find out where the live round originated from?
Yes, this case is also a little unusual in the sense that it wasn't really a who done it. It was a why done it and how done it. By that, I mean, you don't know anybody there. You go out as an investigator, you're trying to find out what happened. Was there an argument on set? Was somebody angry? Did somebody have a mental break? Is there some underlying relationship that may have been the root cause of the shooting? You don't know. And that's why an investigation is conducted, to find out those things. And it's also to trace how that firearm came to be where it came to be.
Okay, sir. And with regard to the search of the prop truck that occurred after the 21st, on the 27th, did you have any concerns with the delay in that search warrant?
Oh, absolutely. There were firearms missing from the weapons cart. They had been moved from between the shooting and the arrival of law enforcement. And they were moved into the safe, into the prop truck. That should have been part of an expanding scene. Like I said, you had the church and the area immediately outside of it. But as soon as it became known the prop truck had an involvement with that shooting, the prop truck should have been secured, just like you saw the scene. Crime scene tape, the deputy placed there, nobody allowed in the truck until such time as you can do a search warrant.
In addition, with regard to the search warrant of Seth Kenny's business, PDQ Props, did you have any concerns about the delay of approximately a month in searching that business?
Oh, of course, of course. A delay of a few days could be an issue, but a month is, you could do anything in a month.
And from your review of records in this case, was it ascertainable that Mr. Kenny was one of the suppliers of ammunition to Rust?
I think it was known almost immediately, both by the people at the scene and Mr. Kenny himself.
With respect to that delay in search warrant, there's some obvious things I think that would be apparent to anybody. But why is that an issue? What are the primary issues that you want to do to try to secure a home and search it right away, secure a business, search it right away? What are the reasons?
Well, it's preservation of evidence. If no one can get inside the business, then no one can tamper with anything that's inside. And you hope to get everything as it was as soon as you can, without any type of alteration.
With regard to Mr. Kenny, did you also have any concerns about collection of DNA, fingerprints, things like that?
I did. Those things can be used for elimination or positively identifying someone. In the case of Mr. Kenny, if they had his major case prints and had his DNA, and none of it was found on the boxes of ammunition, then it would eliminate him as somebody possibly being involved.
In your opinion, and your experience as an investigator, would this have been something that you would expect to have been done? That the supplier of ammunition to Rust, that he would also be looked at in that respect?
Yes, considering the environment and the fact that there should not have been live rounds on set.
Now, with regard to Mr. Kinney, did you also determine whether his phone had been seized to be extracted or whether that had been fully extracted?
It was not. His phone was never.
What is your opinion on that potential or that fact that his phone was never taken for extraction?
The contact between Sarah Zachary and he almost immediately after the shooting warranted that.
And are you speaking about the phone call right after the shooting where we heard testimony and there was a text emergency? Is that the time frame you're talking about?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And are you also aware that there were a number of calls that Seth Kinney, other calls that he was making in contact with Sarah Zachary?
Dozens of calls.
In your opinion, to do a complete investigation, to get the facts out, to get the truth on the table, was that something that you would expect to be done, that they fully investigate Seth Kinney?
Objection.
So there's a couple weird things about this trial that I've noticed that I haven't seen on other trials. When there's an objection, they go up to the bench. Usually you can hear
Sir,
what the objection is and
would you have
what the
expected,
ruling.
in your experience as a homicide detective, a full investigation of Mr. Kinney?
Yes, especially considering that Sarah Zachary worked for him.
Did you also have any concerns about the failure to obtain Mr. Baldwin's phone early on and what happened after that?
As I stated before, that would have been an immediate. Every deputy should have known that as soon as he was identified as being the shooter. And then my understanding is that he left the state with it, and that forensic analysis was done in New York. I should correct myself. The extraction was done in New York.
And do you have any knowledge of whether all of the contents were obtained off of Mr. Baldwin's phone?
I have no way of knowing that.
We talked about the scene, some search warrants. We talked about phones, fingerprints, DNA. Did you have any other opinions or concerns about the quality of this investigation?
One aspect of it that's still kind of a mystery to me is when the lieutenant arrived on the scene, first two things he asked for was the gun and the armor. Thought that was a little unusual. He didn't seem to be the least concerned of who the shooter was and what that individual's status was. He placed Ms. Catetas into his marked unit, which is pretty common, also considering that, she had some anxiety issues and so on. But it immediately became clear she was not free to leave. Whenever the lieutenant would leave his vehicle, he'd tell the deputy to keep an eye on her. When Detective Hancock got to the scene, she almost immediately took charge of Hannah, to include going to the bathroom with her. So she clearly was not free to leave. Every other individual on that ranch was free to walk around, talk to anyone, talk on their phone, do anything they wanted to do, except Ms. Catetas.
Now, you talked about some anxiety and this situation. In your experience, do you have any concerns about interviewing someone in the immediate aftermath of a traumatic situation?
Objection.
I think it is interesting that they go up for every objection. I agree that it was probably because they kept doing these arguing objections. I just think, it's just interesting seeing how different judges handle objections. The other thing I noticed, like a little bit of an anomaly I noticed with this trial, is that the prosecution and the defense will ask a question and then they will start to hear that's true. They did have a full-on spat early on. They stopped their witness from answering.
Shirley, in the course of your career in both civilian and military law enforcement, have you encountered situations where people have been interviewed in traumatic situations?
Yes, I have.
And have you personally been involved in that?
I have.
And
well, I guess that's a way
can
to
you tell
handle
the
it.
jury, do you have any concerns regarding interviewing an individual right after a traumatic situation?
Yes. It probably would have started with a EMT or paramedic checking her to see if she was okay, see what her status was health-wise. Whether she was having, hyperventilating or whatever symptoms or anxiety had, to make sure she was okay that way. Because of confessions and the way those things can go, you're extra careful to make sure that someone is not in a state that can later be determined not to be a good mental state. And all your work in that confession or that statement is not admissible. So you try to avoid that if you can.
And you said that you would have that person looked at in those situations by an EMT or a medical?
Yes.
What is the purpose of that again?
Again, it's just to make sure that she's in a state where she can, or the individual's in a state where they can talk to you. You want them to be as accurate as they can also. So if that causes a little bit of a delay before you can interview them and they're still willing to be interviewed, you may get a more accurate statement from them.
Okay. Thank you. And any other concerns about this investigation that we haven't hit on, Mr. Elliott? You may have stated them all. I just wanted to ask if there's anything else.
I don't think so.
Okay. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross-exam.
Should be interesting.
Mr. Elliott, isn't it true that you are the defense investigator on this case?
It's true.
You work for
How much were
Mr.
you
Bowles and Ms. Gutierrez, and they are paying you.
That's correct.
And as a person who is employed as the defense investigator, it is your job to aid in her defense. Isn't that true?
That's true.
Now, you seem to take issue with the fact that Lieutenant Benavides touched the firearm with his ungloved hand. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
But you agree with me that unlike a lot of homicides or shootings, this one occurred in the presence of upwards of a dozen people.
That's true.
So there was not going to be any mystery as to who had the gun and who pulled the trigger, correct?
To that aspect, no.
You seem to take issue with the fact that the projectile in this case can't be matched to the firearm, right?
Only in the sense that to confirm that the firearm presented to law enforcement was the actual firearm. It doesn't really change what happened.
But where's the controversy? Do you have some information that the jury hasn't heard, that the gun that was fired by Mr. Baldwin is actually not the gun that was used? I haven't come across that. Have you?
No, I was referring to when the officers arrived at the scene, they didn't know that other than what one person told them.
Okay, but it turned out to be true. There's no controversy The gun that was used in the shooting is the gun that was in Mr. Baldwin's hand, right?
True.
Okay. And the reason that the projectile can't be matched to the firearm is because the projectile went through two people, and it was so heavily damaged because it went through two human beings. There wasn't enough marking to match it to the bore of the gun. Isn't that true?
That's true.
That's
in
effective.
Terms of, fingerprints and DNA on the ammunition box. Sir, did you watch the video where Ms. Gutierrez actually says to Mr. Benavides, "This is the box I was pulling from"?
Yes, I did.
And that box is taken and put into Mr. Benavides's patrol unit, correct?
The lieutenant placed it in his vehicle, yes.
Right. So where's the controversy in terms of what box she was pulling from?
Part of it was to find where the live ammo originated. That information may have been on the outside of the box. Could have had Seth Kenny's DNA, could have had Seth Kenny's fingerprints, or anyone else where the box came from originally.
But sir, didn't you watch the second interview with Ms. Gutierrez where she actually held up a photograph for Corporal Hancock and said, "This of our boxes of dummies," and not coincidentally, it matched identically to the box that she identified as the box that she was pulling rounds from that day. You watched that interview, didn't you?
Objection.
I mean, so far, I think this is a fairly effective cross. Because the defense was trying to pick on, well, it looks like there was some tampering in the scene with a detective picking up the actual firearm. But she is making a good point that there's really no disputing who fired this firearm. So, but you can also say, well, still, even if they didn't know,
All right, we're going to take our lunch break.
it's not good practice.
We'll be back by 1:30. Please don't talk among yourselves or anyone else about the evidence received here in court. Thank you.
All rise.
All right. So they are out for a good hour and 10 minutes. And just to recap things here, we heard from two OSHA representatives who made a report. Yeah, no tech issues. I know, right? So the prosecution so far for their defense, the defense for their defense has so far put on two witnesses from OSHA and then this private investigator. And the OSHA representatives were basically saying, we found that the Rust Movie Company was liable.
Hey everybody, Law and Crime's Jesse Weber here. Thank you so much for watching our coverage of the Rust trial of Hannah Gutierrez Reed. This case makes me think about how people get hurt.
Oh my
all kinds of
goodness.
situations
An
that should not
advertisement.
happen.
Imagine
and if you do
that.
get injured, it is so important to know your.
All right, we're sorry, Jesse. We're taking you off the screen. Anyway, so we basically had the two OSHA representatives, and then we have the private detective. Interesting that what they're doing is bringing in different investigative experts and investigative bodies to dispute. I actually do have premium. That's actually on the tail end of they put that in there. They inserted that in there, Teresa. I do have premium. So you get that if you get premium or not, baby. They just stuck it on there in the video in the stream. So anyway, those are the witnesses we've heard so far. I feel that the cross-examination of these witnesses has been pretty effective in breaking down why what they found should matter in this particular case. You know, OSHA is not a criminal investigative body. They are they investigate employee, workplace safety, basically. And they did find that the Rust Movie Company was liable. And they don't cite specific individuals. And the Rust Movie Company came to a settlement, a fine settlement of $100,000. And the OSHA representative said that that is on the high side of the settlements that they've seen. And then this private investigator came on and noticed a few things that he thought were janky with the investigation, like how long it took to do a search warrant, that some cell data was not extracted from the first assistant director, and also the fact that one of the law enforcement officers physically handled the gun and some other area and some other items without a glove, which is weird. But in general, this whole thing, hey Adrian, we're about to close this out because they just broke for lunch, and I'm gonna stop this stream and start up another one. But please come back for the afternoon session. But I'm just recapping what we've heard today. And in general, I just think there's just a lot of sketchiness. There's a lot of sketchiness in this situation, for sure. And since there's so much sketchiness, it's hard to figure out where the sketchiness is originating. We got the person who's on trial. She handed off what looked like a bag of Coke to somebody to take away. Sounds like a person, an unidentified person, someone they have not identified yet, still left the scene. It is very curious that this Sarah hasn't come under more fire, because it seems like, especially since she threw some things out, and she's admitted to that. So, lots and lots and lots of sketchiness. So I don't, I always feel this way for the jury, but I don't envy the job that they have to do today. I don't, or today, or whenever they start deliberating. So we'll see how many more witnesses they, I agree, Lucy, that is sketch, because they have their call sheets. They must have deleted that person from the call sheet. I mean, maybe it was like their drug provider, their on-set drug provider or something. Who knows? But my God, it is so sketchy. It really is. So I'm going to close down this stream. You guys go have a wonderful break, a nice lunch or dinner or whatever it is. And we'll be back here in a little over an hour, hanging out with each other. It's interesting to see how many, it's just interesting to see how, which people follow which trials, but anyway, so I will see you all very soon. Thanks for being here. Please remember to hit the thumbs up, and have a great break. See you later.